So till now we have covered how to create a custom virtual network. Oh, sorry, how to create a virtual machine and how to access that virtual machine. We also covered how to add a data disk. Also, we saw how to create a virtual network. So we created a virtual network in the name of Exchange Lab. Then we deployed two virtual machines. One is London DC01 and Exchange SRV001 and the same virtual network, which are part of the same virtual network. And we saw how to assign a custom DNS network on the virtual network itself. So your all the machines which are part of the virtual network can get the custom DNS server IP address. And we configured on our London DC machine Active Directory Services role and DNS server role. And the DNS which is server role which is configured on our London DC machine is configured as part of your virtual networks. Now today we are going to cover how to deploy or how to install web server role on your machine. Right? So so I'll be using this machine which is Exchange SRV. So or all we'll create another machine. Let me delete this machine. We don't need this machine. I'll delete this machine. I don't need this demo VM also. We'll delete that also because it is unnecessary going to cost me. I'll delete that machine later on. Right, so we are going to create a new Azure virtual machine. So what we'll do first, we'll deploy a Azure virtual machine, then we'll configure web services, we'll install internet information services, and we'll configure as it as a web server, and we'll try to access that web server from internet. Let's select a subscription. We'll select our resource group as Exchange Lab RG only. I'm going to you or let's create a new resource group. We'll say Azure Lab. I've given the resource group as Azure Lab, and we'll create first one virtual network. Let's create a virtual network first. So I'm going to make use of Azure Lab resource group. We'll give the virtual network name. We'll say Azure Lab VNet. Azure Lab VNet. We are giving the name. Region, we are going to select Central India. We'll move next. At present, I'm not going to configure any security related stuff. We'll move next. Here, I'm having one subnet, which is 10.network. I'll rename it as subnet A and I'll save it. And I'll add another subnet. So I'll click on add a subnet. So it has taken subnet IP address, starting IP address 1.0. So it will be 1.0 to 1.255. We'll give the name as subnet B. We'll click on add. So we have added two subnets, subnet A and subnet B. We'll move next. At present, we don't want to add tags. We'll skip that portion and we'll click on review plus create. So it is running a validation check that all parameters are correct and no uh, repetition is there or no same thing is on the network. So we have 256 addresses, but as we have understood, we'll be able to use only 253 addresses. Sorry, we'll be able to use 251 addresses, 5 addresses Azure keep it. We'll click on create. So our virtual network is created. So yes, recording is on. Okay. So virtual network is created. Now let's go and deploy a virtual machine. We'll deploy a new virtual machine. So we'll select the Azure Lab Resource Group. We'll give the virtual machine name as Web Server 01, Central India. We don't require any redundancy. We require standard security. And it will be a 2019 data center edition machine with 64-bit architecture. I'll give the configuration as two virtual CPUs and 4 GB of RAM. Username it is asking, so we'll give the username and password. So I'm going to make use of username and password as we will allow RDP connection. We'll move next. So at present, I'm not going to attach any OS disk, data disk. Sorry, OS disk is there. I'm not going to attach any data disk. OS disk, I'm going to configure as standard SSD instead of premium SSD. We'll move next to networking. It has selected Azure Lab VNet automatically, and we have two subnets, subnet A and subnet B. I'm going to select subnet B here. I'm going to select subnet B here. We will be having a public IP address. We'll select delete public IP and NIC when VMS deleted. We are not going to configure any load balancing options. We'll move next to management. Now here I'm not going to do anything except shutdown option. So shutdown, we'll select the Indian Standard Time. At 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time, my machine will get powered off. And for patch orchestration, I'm going to select manual updates. We'll go to monitoring. We'll just move ahead, skip it, and we'll come to review and create. So validations passed. We'll click on create. So let the virtual machine get deployed. Then we are going to configure this virtual machine as a web server. Okay, our deployment is completed. Now let's go to the virtual machine section. We have our virtual machine web server 01. Still it is in the creating state. We'll refresh it. Now it is in the running state. Let's copy the public IP address. And we'll connect the virtual machine. Now we need to connect and we need to provide our username password. So let me copy the password. We'll log into the virtual machine. So my machine is up and running. So let the server manager pop up. Then we'll install our web server role, that is Internet Information Service IS role. So we are not going to create any coding, any website here. We are just installing a role. So it has a default page, right? We'll launch that default page. We'll validate on the local machine. Then we'll try to access this that web page from outside of the internet because this machine has a public IP address.
Okay.
So let that the population get completed. A server manager is getting populated with all the services. Okay, our server manager is up. Let's go and add roles and features. We'll add server manager role. We'll move next, next, next. We'll select IS, our web server role. So it is asking to add some features. We'll say add features. We'll move next, 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 and install. I've not done any complex task because that is a work of developer. I have just installed the web server role. So a local web page will be configured. This default web page, we'll just review it on the local machine by navigating to the URL localhost. Once the role is installed, we'll wait for
Okay.
a moment. So the role installation is completed. We'll click close. We'll open our Internet Explorer. We'll say ask me later and we'll here run the URL localhost. So we can see our web server role is properly configured. It is showing Internet Information Services. Now this page we want to access from outside of our network. So we are on the cloud network. We want to access on the internet. So we'll copy the public IP address. We'll copy the public IP address and we'll try to access from the internet. Yet it is saying checking the connection, checking the proxy and the firewall. Took too long to respond. Why it is not accessible? Yes, Krishna, why it is not accessible? Any idea?
Like you have not set any firewall or proxy system.
See, what
Not
we did when we deployed the virtual machine, if we go to the networking tab, so under networking inbound port rules, oh, we have only allowed port number 3389. That is RDP port number. Apart from that, what inbound traffic is allowed? So it is allowed that from your Azure load balancer to, sorry, from your Azure load balancer to any destination and from your virtual network to virtual network. Apart from that, all the traffics are denied, blocked. So here
mm,
we need to allow the HTTP and HTTPS traffic. Then only our service will be accessible. So we'll add the inbound port rule HTTP. I'm selecting the service. I'll select the service here, HTTP. So the protocol is TCP. Action is allowed. Priority is 310. Let us allow any HTTP inbound request. Source is any from any IP address. I'm not specifying any specific IP address. I'm saying from any IP address to the any IP address. So source and destination are any. We'll click on add rule. Now we have added the inbound rule. We don't require outbound rule. We don't require if you want internet from your network to go outside, right? So at present we have denied all traffic except this. So if you want outbound rules also, then you can access it. So at present our rule is added successfully. Now let's go back and refresh this page. You can see now our web page is loading successfully. Our web page is loading successfully.
got
Now,
it.
we are accessing this web page using an IP address, which is not a security good security practice. So instead, we should access it through a domain name, right? We should access the website always through a domain name. So if I want to configure a domain name for my this virtual machine, right? At present, I don't have any custom domain name here. But what Azure helps us with, so if we go to overview, and here you can see it is asking for a DNS name. It's saying not configured. If we click on this URL, so it is asking you can configure a DNS name label optional. So I'll say, for example, web SRV 2024. And it is showing me the green mark. So let me pull my pen. So it has successfully validated. It is showing green mark. So my name will be web server web SRV 2024 dot centralindia.cloudapp.azure.com. So this will be our URL. So let's click on save. Now if we copy the URL followed by web SRV 2024. So let's navigate to in private window web SRV 2024 dot centralindia dot cloudapp.azure.com. Now it is going through a request HTTPS, right? And as HTTPS was not available, it navigated to HTTP request and it is able to successfully load our web page of Internet Information Services. Right, so till now what we covered, we deployed a virtual network, we created two subnets, then we deployed a virtual machine in as part of that subnet, then we deployed web server role with the default settings, then we tried to access that web server using the IP address from the internet. So it was not accessible. Then we permitted the port number 80, that is HTTP service in our network security group under networking section. So it was accessible. Then we configured a custom DNS name for our web server, and we are able to access the web server with the help of that custom DNS name. Clear till now?
Yes, sir. It's clear, sir.
Now let's say if you want to deploy a lot of web servers, if you want to deploy 20 web servers and you want to deploy web server role on all of the machines. So it is not a good practice that you will go to each and every machine, log in and deploy a web server role. Instead, while deploying the virtual machine itself, you want that virtual machine role should be deployed, right? So first, what we are going to do, we are going to create a script here. So I'll open IS, sorry, not IS, PowerShell ISE. We'll open PowerShell ISE and we'll write a two-liner script. So the script we are going to write is very simple script. We don't need to put our brains more. So we'll say import module server manager, and we are going to say add Windows feature. So at present it is not showing the option because I'm on my Windows 10 machine, right? I'm not on a server machine, right? So we'll say web server role. We want to install web server, web hyphen server, and we are going to say include all sub feature, include all sub feature. And we are going to save this file as a PowerShell file. We'll go to downloads, or we'll go to C drive, scripts folder. Probably we have scripts folder, and I'm going to give the is.ps1 file. I have given is.ps1 file. Right. Now let's go and deploy another virtual machine. We can create a virtual machine, create Azure virtual machine. So we'll select the resource group, Azure Lab. We'll say Web Server 2. We'll deploy with the same settings what we selected previously. So here I'm going to give the username, password. We'll allow the port number, HTTP and HTTPS also here. We'll move to disk. We'll skip it. We'll move to networking. Now here I am going with subnet B itself. We'll move to management. We'll give these shutdown options, and we'll give the manual updates as orchestration. We'll skip monitoring, and now we'll come to the advanced option. We'll come to the advanced option. Here we need to provide the path of the PS file, the PowerShell file. Now the catch is here, I can't provide directly the file from my machine. So if I go and select an extension to install, I'll be defining an extension. So I'll say custom extension, custom script extension. Now it is saying next. So now it is going to ask for to browse the path. But this path, if I click browse, it will be from my storage account. It will not be from my local machine because it can't access the path always on my local machine. So I need to have a storage account where there I need to create a folder, I need to upload that file, and then I need to give the path here, right? So what I'll do, I'll close this first. I'll cancel this and we'll keep the screen active. We'll go to the new session of the Azure portal. We'll create a storage account. So this storage account should be created first before deploying the virtual machine. Or what we can do, we can cancel this. I'll cancel this. We'll recreate. these steps again. We'll search for the storage account. We'll create a storage account here. So I'll give the subscription. We'll give the resource group as Azure Lab. We'll give the storage account name as storage 2024. It is okay. The field can contain only lowercase. Okay. Storage 2024. It will be in Central India. And I'm going to give the standard storage. I don't need at present any premium storage. We'll move next. At present, I'm not going to configure any security related stuff. We'll move networking. We'll skip the networking part. Next, data protection also will skip. Encryption also will skip. Tags also will skip, and we'll click review. I'm just creating the storage account with the default steps. Now, why we require a storage account? As it is going to access the file from some location. That location would be a folder. Now that folder will be part of a storage, right? But as it is a storage, it requires a storage account. So without a storage account, you can't create a storage or you can't create a folder which will be accessible overall your Azure network.
Got it.
So my storage account is created. Now let's go back to the storage account. So we'll refresh it. So our storage account is created. Let's go to the storage account. Now here we have data storage type. So we have four types of data storages: containers, file shares, queues, tables. So at present we don't need a table, we don't need a queue, we don't need a file share, we need a container. So we'll go to containers, we'll click a container. So I'm going to give the container name as IS storage. Okay, lowercase I need to give IS storage. And at present, I'm not configuring any encryption. We'll just create it. So our storage folder is created, container is created. We'll go to this container. Now here we need to upload that our PowerShell file. We'll click upload. We'll browse the file. We'll go to C drive, scripts folder, and we'll upload this IS file. We'll open and upload. So the file got uploaded successfully. So now we have our file in place, storage in place from where we can access this PowerShell script file. See, I have written a very small script file, but in production, you might have long script files which you are writing for installation, configuration, and lot of things. So when the virtual machine is getting deployed, it will do a lot of installation and configuration also, right? For example, installing the antivirus, installing the DLP tool, etc. I'm just giving hypothetical example. Now let's go back to the virtual machine. We'll click create, deploy new Azure virtual machine. We'll select the resource group, Azure Lab. We'll give the virtual machine name as Web Server 02. We'll go with the availability options as no redundancy, security type standard, and image 2019 data center with 64-bit architecture, two virtual CPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. We'll give the username. I'm going to configure the password. Now here we are going to allow HTTP and HTTPS so we can test directly. We'll move to disk. I'll give the OS disk as premium SSD only. I'm not going to configure any data disk. We'll move to networking. Here we'll again select subnet B. These ports are allowed. We'll move to We'll skip the load balancer option. We'll go to management. We'll change the time zone for auto shutdown to IST time zone. And for patch updation, we'll select manual updates and we'll click directly review plus create and we'll deploy the virtual machine. So now it is going to deploy the virtual machine and it is, sorry, we didn't configure the extensions, right? Okay, we'll cancel the deployment. We'll redeploy again. We'll go to create Azure Lab, web server 02. See, I also forgot, you also didn't reminded me. We need to provide the custom extension. So we'll configure web server 3 machine, no redundancy, standard security, image options. We'll give the credentials. We'll define the ports. We'll move next disk, premium SSD, no data disk. Networking, again, we'll select subnet B. Management will provide the shutdown options of Indian IST and manual update option under orchestration. Now we'll come to advanced. Here we have extensions. So we'll select a custom extension of installing a script. I'm going to search for the extension, custom script extension. We'll select the extension. Next, we'll now select the storage account. So here we can see we have our storage account. We selected our storage account, so it is showing multiple containers. So one container was already there of the logs. We created another container, IS storage. We'll select this container. So now this is showing our file. If you have multiple files will be visible here. So we'll select our file and we'll select here in the bottom. So our file is created. We can define any arguments if we want. So I'm not going to define any arguments at present. We'll just click on create. We'll move to review and create now. And we'll click on create. So it is initiating the deployment. So deployment has already started. So now this deployment might take some 3-4 minutes extra for in the background deployment of this custom script.
Okay. So as an Azure admin, we should know the scripting very well, sir. We use
Yeah,
to
to some
write.
extent you should know. See, this is PowerShell scripting. What I have written was a PowerShell script. It was not Azure script. It was just a PowerShell script, which is part of Windows administration. Or
Okay,
whenever we are doing any scripting for Exchange, also that is also a PowerShell scripting. The backend is PowerShell only. Just the commandlets are of Azure. So
oh,
you should have knowledge of basic PowerShell scripting.
okay,
What script I have written, that was completely a PowerShell script. I have saved as a PowerShell file only.
okay, sir. Got it.
Okay, so you can see it is deploying the custom script extension. So our deployment is completed. Now let's navigate to the virtual machine. Right, so we have our web server 03. If we go to the networking tab, we have allowed RDP, HTTP, and HTTPS itself. Right. So now what we can do, we can copy the public IP address and let's open new in private window and paste the public IP address. So we can see that our IIS is successfully installed. So we created a custom script. We attached that custom script with our virtual machine with the deployment itself. So while the virtual machine was getting deployed, the IIS got deployed. So clear what we did, Krishna?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's clear.
Right. So while deployment of the virtual machine itself, we deployed the IIS. We didn't deploy the virtual machine first, and after taking the RDP session, I have not taken the RDP session of this machine till now. Right, without taking the RDP session, without logging to the machine, I we have deployed IIS or web server role with the help of custom script extension. So that is the work of custom script extension. On Monday, we'll see how to deploy a Linux virtual machine, how to access the Linux virtual machine, and how to configure a web server on the Linux virtual machine. That will be covering on Monday.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so we'll conclude the session today here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, sir.
So you guys can complete the lab